it's over. The judge has made his decision.
But on the streets of St. Louis tonight, this is not over. A verdict of not guilty for a former St. Louis officer ignites anger. Protesters fan out, pushing back drivers, pelting police with water bottles, with officers firing back with mace. News Force coverage of the verdict in the Jason Stockley trial starts right now. News 4 is following breaking news. Protests in the Central West End have now turned into vandalism of Mayor Lyda Krewson's house.
This is all happening in the aftermath of former officer Jason Stockley being found not guilty in the death of Anthony Lamar Smith. News 4's Vincent Blandon was walking with that group of protesters when it happened. He's been with them all night. Vinny, what can you tell us?
Courtney and Steven, let's just hit it right off the top. They've been protesting since about 9 o'clock this morning. It's been very peaceful, no problems, outside of the fact that, they've been disrupting things. The violence was not there, but at 9:47 p.m., that's when the security officer we're walking with tonight, the photographer and myself, that's when we heard windows start to shatter. So at that point, we turned around and we looked and we saw 3 red marks on windows of a house on Westminster Plaza located near Lake Avenue. Now, back out the way, please, sir. Now, what we did, we got over there and we realized that the protesters, had said that this is the home of Mayor Lyda Krewson. So we went up and got video. We did our job, and you can see the officers are here. We went up there and got the video. The officers came. I don't even know where they came from. The helicopters were up. It was very bright, and they rushed us off the property immediately. But let me get back to the protest. This had been peaceful all day until 9:47 p.m. The folks, they've traveled along the ramp to the interstate. They wanted to get on the interstate. They could not get on the interstate. Law enforcement told them to turn around, so the law enforcement turned around, and the protesters turned around. Then we started walking, and this is sort of where it went off script. They had been following the path from Euclid Avenue in Maryland. They had been going straight down near the Children's Hospital, Lindell Avenue back. We're going to, come on, let's back out of the way, you guys. I can still talk, but we had been following a routine, if you will. But at some point, that routine went off script, and they came down into this neighborhood, and that is, okay, I'm going to back out. That is where they told us to get out of the way. So as you can see, all of this is happening now. We don't need the camera here. Let's put the camera on the law enforcement. So this is the most intense we've seen it all day from my standpoint. This is the most intense we've seen it. And I got to tell you, the nerves, the emotions are now high. This had been a peaceful event all day long. Everyone had been talking. The businesses closed. They were notified by the Central West End Association. The businesses had been notified. The businesses stopped and brought water out to the protesters. Back up, can you please? The people have brought out water. Everybody actually joking, beating drums, playing music and everything. And then again at 9:47, all of this started. But we did speak with a couple of protesters along the way. And I want you to go ahead and listen to what they had to say about the work that they were doing tonight.
Okay, you're doing a story. Why don't you pay attention to people you're running into, bro?
I understand that this is something we're on live television.
You just ran over people.
Hey, he didn't try to, man. He's trying to get things happen.
All right, so as is obvious from that video you saw on Venton's live shot, groups have shifted from downtown St. Louis to the Central West End tonight.
They started moving there around 6:30. Protesters have been up and down streets throughout the Central West End. Right now, some roads are shut down around Euclid and McPherson.
Before all this, the protesters flooded out of the Central West End toward Forest Park and Highway 64, Interstate 40. This is video from about 7:30 tonight. Sky Zoom 4 capturing protesters attempting to shut down Interstate 64 at Kings Highway, but they were turned away by police. Well, we have seen scenes like this all day long. Tonight, an American flag being set on fire in protest in the Central West End.
And tonight, this afternoon, protesters were seen jumping on a St. Louis police car downtown. The windshield of that squad car, if you look closely, was smashed in. Tonight, police telling us at least one person has been arrested for that vandalism. Emotions have been high ever since the verdict came out just before 9 o'clock this morning.
For the first time tonight, we are hearing from Jason Stockley himself.
I did not murder Anthony Lamar Smith. I did not plant a gun. It was an imminent threat to my life. I had to. The taking of a life is the most significant thing that one can do, and it's not something that is done lightly, and it's not something that should ever be celebrated, and it's just a horrible experience altogether. And unfortunately, you're reacting in those few seconds, and you have to make decisions based on limited information and limited time, and they're the most important decision you ever make because it could be your last.
As part of his 30-page ruling, Judge Timothy Wilson wrote he was not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Stockley was guilty. Tonight, we're bringing you live team coverage on the ground and in the air with Sky Zoom 4. We have crews in the Central West End, Forest Park, and Midtown, which have become the focus of tonight's protests.
We want to go right back to our Vinton Blandon in the Central West End, where protesters have been gathered. They're vandalizing Mayor Lyda Cruz's house. Vinny, you're walking away from the scene, it looks like. What's the update?
The update is every time we stop, get away from the crowd continues to go because the law enforcement officers, they continue to go. Mayor Cruz's house is probably 5 blocks away, and we went away from there, and now law enforcement is coming back here. You know, typically at a crime scene, they would set up a perimeter of some sort with yellow tape and say, hey, stay right here. This is the case. Well, everyone moved away from the property at Mayor Lyda Cruz's house. We were safe. Then all of a sudden, they continued moving. I'm going to get out the way. Just let you guys see that. You don't need to see me. But this is a situation we're trying to get away from here because Lyda Cruz, the mayor, her house is probably 5 blocks away. And law enforcement, they are with their full riot gear pushing us back. I'm not even sure of where we are. But according to what's around me, this is the New City community, New City schools, successful students, successful lives. This is the area where we are. But again, the helicopters are up. The lights are shining down on the ground. The protesters, now they are upset. We've heard that when we had to run away a few seconds ago, Courtney and Steve. Everyone was peaceful. Again, the magic number is 9:47. That's when everything went south. So let's take a listen. Law enforcement is now saying something on sirens. Okay, according to the protesters, they told us to move back, but I want to send it back to you guys. If you have a question, go ahead and ask it.
No, Vinton, we just want to emphasize your safety, our crew's safety is paramount. Don't do anything to put yourself at risk, and obviously follow police instructions at all times. Vinton Blandon reporting from the Central West End tonight. Within the last hour, Missouri Governor Eric Greitens has spoken.
He's been in St. Louis, keeping an eye on what's going on right now. News 4's Matt Cesney is live in Midtown with what he had to say. Matt?
Yeah, Courtney, Steve, not only has the governor been keeping an eye on what's going on, he apparently has been all over the city today visiting with law enforcement. What he told us tonight is actually what's going on behind me. I'll step aside. You can take a look. National Guardsmen positioned in front of firehouses all around the city of St. Louis. This is the firehouse at Vandeventer and Forest Park Parkway. Just over 1 hour ago, the governor was out at the fire department headquarters in North St. Louis. His motorcade arriving, and he immediately went out and back into the compound area to meet with state police officials and also with guardsmen who were positioned back there. The governor says that city, county, and state police have been doing a fantastic job throughout the day, and he continues to stay plugged in to what is going on.
The local authorities are still and are currently in charge. Our job as a state is to support them, and we've been supporting them with the Department of Public Safety, the Missouri State Highway Patrol. We've also been coordinating with federal authorities and federal law enforcement, and our National Guard are currently, many of them are in a standby capacity. Others are engaged in helping to protect critical infrastructure, helping to protect our firehouses as we head into the night.
All right, so the governor really would not comment as to whether the National Guard's role will expand as we get into the weekend, but clearly some National Guardsmen have been mobilized and positioned throughout the city, namely at the firehouses as we are seeing. The governor did have praise for all the peaceful demonstrators who were outside today, but then he continued to insist that the instances we saw earlier today and likely tonight, instances with the officers being pelted and having things thrown at them, police cars being damaged, and even the windows being broken tonight in the Central West End. He says police will not tolerate that, and they will make arrests. The governor says he will continue to follow and monitor the situation throughout the night here in the city of St. Louis. We are live in Midtown. Matt Cesny, News 4.
Earlier in the day, Governor Greitens met with those running the Emergency Operations Center. They went over the game plan for today and tonight, and of course for the weekend. The governor says he is in constant contact with local city and county police and elected leaders.
The Missouri Highway Patrol is on the ground to assist St. Louis police. Deputies will specifically be helping keep protesters off interstates, which the governor made very important, and also keep them from interfering with traffic. They say their top priority is protecting pedestrians, drivers, and fellow officers. Many events across the St. Louis area were canceled today due to protests, but the famous balloon glow in Forest Park went on as scheduled. News 4's Lauren Posen has been there since the event started today. Lauren?
That's right. Everything ran very smoothly. The only thing that did happen was weather related. There was a fireworks show set for 9:15 tonight, but because the winds were blowing in the wrong direction, they decided to cancel that. Of course, safety was on top of everyone's mind tonight at the event. Officials told me they were in constant communication with police to ensure everyone had a safe and fun time at the event. Now, we were here all day. We didn't see any officers walking around the areas we were at, but we did see many of the Balloon Glow staff walking around and making sure everything was going okay, and it really did. Now, many people I came out with, or many people I spoke with rather, told me that they came out to have a good time, and despite the protests throughout the city, they did not want to stop their Friday night events. So I spoke with an SLU student who told me that she was really impressed with how police in the city have handled things so far.
They were just on top of things, making sure that everybody was in a safe environment. And so there's a lot of people that did feel the same way, I think, as we did. That's why everybody is out here tonight.
I mean, what's going to happen is going to happen. So, I mean, I have no control over that.
Do you guys feel safe?
Yeah, I feel completely safe.
Now, tomorrow is the balloon race, and that is scheduled to go on as scheduled. Of course, if that changes, we will let you know on air and on KMOV.com. And also on KMOV.com, we have a running list of many events. Should they change, they're all there for you, so you can be up to speed on what's going on with the events this weekend. Reporting live in Forest Park, Lauren Posen, News 4.
All right, Lauren, we also want to add that for now, the U2 concert scheduled for tomorrow at the Dome at the American Center is still on. About 40,000 people expected for that. Of course, we'll let you know if that changes.
Demonstrations downtown today did shut down some businesses. Our Eric Cox has been covering those protests there, as well as the Central West End tonight. Eric?
Courtney, that's exactly right. Right now I'm standing on Westminster, and this street here that makes up the intersection back there, that is Lake. The 500 block is sitting right next to us here, and that is the block that Mayor Lyda Crewson lives on. There's plenty of police out here right now, a large presence after what happened outside of her home. There's actually a gentleman in handcuffs sitting on the curb directly across from us. Officers aren't allowing us to get any closer than where we are right now, and the reason they haven't cordoned off this area with police tape is because there are still residents filtering in and out of this area. But as you mentioned earlier today, I was also in downtown St. Louis for the afternoon protests where 13 people were arrested and 4 officers assaulted. Protesters stomping and dancing on top of a police SUV. This following former St. Louis police officer Jason Stockley's acquittal of first-degree murder. Just one example of demonstrations in downtown St. Louis taking a destructive turn.
It's been disruptive. We think we all know that, but it's hardly been completely peaceful. I've had officers assaulted. St.
Louis City Interim Police Chief Lawrence O'Toole tells News 4 one of his officers was treated for a hand injury while others had rocks and bottles hurled at them. The department shared these images as proof of what their men and women endured. Police responded to the unpeaceful unrest with pepper spray. In total, 13 people were put in cuffs as officers dispersed disruptive crowds. But with the weekend only beginning, the city's top cop says they're prepared for whatever's next.
There's a lot of unknowns, so we expect other locations, and we have a plan, and I think that, we're pretty confident with our plan.
As of right now, some of the officers out here just started putting on their gas masks after one of the officers shouted, "Gas, gas." We're not really certain what's going on. We can't see too much of the scene because, again, officers are keeping us back, but it does appear that there is more action taking place at this time. We'll remain on scene out here and bring you guys the latest developments as they unfold. For now, I'm live in the Central West End. Eric Cox, News 4.
Eric, can you confirm, before we let you go, any evidence at this point of actual tear gas being deployed?
It looks like there's some sort of fog in the air headed this way. I cannot get too close, though, Steve. Reason being, the officers have told us explicitly not to cross their path. They are actually keeping us at this distance, they said, for our own safety. But it does appear that there's foggier air down there. We're going to try and make our way down there by going around the long way, and then I may be able to more ably confirm for you whether or not, in fact, tear gas was deployed.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. My error, even asking you that question. Make sure you're safe and make sure you're complying with police orders. Thanks, Eric. Eric Cox reporting live in the Central West End. Nothing is more important than safety. Today's not guilty verdict was handed down in a 30-page ruling made by Judge Timothy Wilson. The judge said his ruling would not be swayed or affected by fear of criticism.
Chris Negus breaks down the verdict and has reaction from Jason Stockley's defense attorney as well as the St. Louis Circuit Attorney.
No question the verdict garners strong emotions on both sides, those that agree with the judge and those that do not. Judge Timothy Wilson released his verdict in a written statement saying he was bound by the Judicial Code of Conduct and would not be swayed by partisan interest, public clamor, or fear of criticism. Saying after reviewing all of the evidence, this court, as the trier of fact, is simply not firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. Jason Stockley's defense attorney.
These are the facts. This is what was said in the courtroom, and there's been a tremendous amount of misrepresentation, and that was a real concern to him and Brian and me, and Judge Wilson set all of that straight, and so I'm thrilled that the decision was written the way it was written.
I understand the verdict has created frustration and anger for many in our community.
St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner voiced her disappointment with the decision.
I believe he committed murder in the first degree beyond a reasonable doubt under the laws of the state of Missouri.
The prosecution believes Stockley intended to kill Smith and presented evidence of an audio recording where Stockley said, "We're killing this expletive." Judge Wilson wrote, "It is apparent from the dash cam audio and video that the pursuit was stressful," and goes on to say people say all kinds of things in the heat of the moment, and the statement can be ambiguous depending on the context. As for the gun found in Smith's car, the prosecution argued it was planted by Stockley. The judge wrote, "The court finds the contention that Stockley planted the handgun found in the Buick is not supported by the evidence." Wilson said, "The gun was a full-size revolver and not a small gun. Instead, if Stockley was in possession of that gun, it would have been visible on the cell phone video presented as evidence." The judge added, based on its nearly 30 years on the bench, that an urban heroin dealer not in possession of a firearm would be an anomaly. Both sides walked away from the ruling with very different feelings.
Everybody has a right to an opinion, but you don't have a right to your own set of facts.
I stand by our charges. We proved murder first degree beyond a reasonable doubt.
Some of you might be wondering, could the state bring additional charges or could there be an appeal? Kim Gardner said, "It's over. The judge made his decision." In the newsroom, Chris Negus, News 4.
Tonight, News 4 has learned one critical component of the case, why it didn't come up at trial. The testimony of Stockley's partner, Brian Bianchi. Defense attorneys tell us he pled the fifth when the case was at grand jury. That means he got on the stand and declined to say anything, which is a right allowed under the U.S. Constitution. This afternoon, we heard from Anthony Lamar Smith's mother for the first time since the verdict was made public. She spoke from West Florissant and Acme, the location where her son was killed in North St. Louis.
So I'm not going to stand here and say no justice, no peace. My soul is burning. My heart is broken. I say I ain't get no justice. I could never be at peace.
No need for apologizing for waiting.
Annie Smith and others who gathered there with her said they thought the evidence showed Jason Stockley committed murder. But she believes the system did not work on behalf of her son. Tonight, her attorney is also addressing the verdict. We asked Anthony Gray about the comment in the judge's decision about the assumption that a suspected heroin dealer would have a gun.
I saw that, and I really don't want to make an on-air comment about that statement. I find it personally offensive, but beyond that, I don't want to make any other comment.